text called the Book of the Dead.
The Book of the Dead is the modern name that we give to a collection of spells that the Egyptians actually called the Book of Coming Out by Day. They were to facilitate your transition to the next life, your rebirth as a living spirit in the next life.
Chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead seems to describe a global catastrophe that happened thousands of years before the rise of ancient Egypt.
The dismay after the incredible horror of the catastrophic disaster is making it impossible for the terrorized population to escape.
Some researchers studying other portions of the text believe this disaster occurred when Venus made a specific looping motion through Orion, which last occurred in 9782 BC.
And in the Egyptian text, the chapter 17 from the Book of the Dead, there is a code described, and that states that if the loop from Venus above Orion comes back, that will be the year of the next cataclysm.
According to researchers' estimates, this celestial event is expected to occur again in the same year ostensibly specified by doomsday prophecies of the Mayans, Hopi, Hindus, and other cultures across the globe. 2012. Could the Egyptians be yet one more ancient culture predicting our demise by cosmic forces in that year? A clue to the nature of this cataclysm is said to be contained in this phrase from the Book of the Dead.
After the destruction, the old lion turned around.
Some interpret this reference of the old lion turning around as a description of the Earth experiencing a cataclysmic reversal of its rotation. They believe such a reversal can be caused by an extreme phenomenon called a polar shift. Scientists theorize that a polar shift can occur when the Earth's swirling molten core changes direction. Some speculate that this would trigger vast and sudden displacements in the Earth's crust.
This is when, if you can imagine, the crust of the Earth is going to rotate somewhat over the magma. The problem is when you actually get the physical crust of the Earth rotating, that's when we're going to be in for a ride.
There are some that believe a polar shift on Earth can be triggered by sudden and dramatic spikes in energy on our sun, in the form of massive storms and solar flares.
What we know from the past is that there's an 11-year solar cycle, and we'll be coming to the peak of that solar cycle in 2012.
And according to a number of studies, this next solar climax will be far more powerful than any that's been recorded.
Still, more scientists reason that the effects of solar activity in 2012 will be far from catastrophic.
Worst case scenario is we have some problems with our satellites. We have a lot more satellites up there than we did at last solar maximum, and the ones we have up there are much more sensitive to damage from solar radiation.
Further, most scientists say the chances of an imminent polar shift are astronomically low. Many agree that polar shifts may have rocked the Earth in the past, but that the most recent occurred tens of millions of years ago. They say no evidence exists of a shift within human memory that could have been recorded by the ancient Egyptians.
If anything like that happened, we would see the record of it in ice core drills as well as sediment drills off the coasts of New Zealand and other parts of the world. And all those drills tell us nothing like that happened.
Researchers have also called into question the ancient Egyptian text on which the polar shift theory is founded.
Many people today will read those texts and pull out applications to the modern times in terms of catastrophes and end times and prophecy. And I really don't think you could do that because they're not specific enough. It's just a matter of an interpretation.
Still, the possibility remains that the Egyptians knew of an apocalypse centuries before their own time. and that they calculated this global catastrophe could strike again in ours.
If they witness certain events, like meteoritic strikes or cataclysms, then it may well be that they got so spooked out of it that they somehow try to warn others.
Did the ancient Egyptians preserve such a warning in documents other than the Book of the Dead? This book is said to be lost until recent decades. Like the Orion prophecy, it foresees doom unleashed by forces beyond Earth. It speaks of an entity approaching us from the far reaches of space, aptly known as the Destroyer. Believers are convinced the ancient Egyptians looked into the future 4,500 years ago and saw the end of the world in our time. But there are many different sources of the prophecy, and debate endures over which may be the most accurate. Some believe this book is the most credible source of all. It is called the Colburn Bible.
The Colburn Bible is a 3,600-year-old secular anthology. The first part was written about the same time as the Old Testament. The Colburn Bible gives us a way to look inside the minds of the Egyptians who built the pyramids.
11 separate books comprise the Colburn Bible. The first 6 written by the ancient Egyptians, the remaining 6 by Celtic priests. The oldest part was purportedly written after the drama of the Exodus, which some date to the 15th century before Christ. This was a pivotal episode in Hebrew history, when the prophet Moses confronted the Egyptian pharaoh and eventually delivered the enslaved Hebrews from bondage. According to the Colburn Bible, this seminal event left the Egyptians demoralized.
Their pantheon of gods had failed them. The Hebrews had thumped them pretty good, and they just were trying to understand. So they went out and gathered all of the folklore and wisdom that they could find within their trading realm. And what survives of it is the first part of the Colburn Bible.
The Colburn Bible is said to have been discovered in England in the 12th century. But since no original manuscript seems to exist, some have doubts about its authenticity. Like adherents of the Orion prophecy, believers of the Colburn Bible say it warns of a celestial disaster, perhaps a catastrophic polar shift.
In that event, it is an extinction-level event, maybe 90% of life on the planet.
But according to the Colburn Bible, the extraterrestrial force that triggers the event is not the sun. Instead, the prophecy mentions a mysterious celestial body called the Destroyer. The text says it will not collide with the Earth, but pass close enough to trigger global devastation.
It has its own magnetic field, positive and negative. The planet Earth also has its own magnetic field. It necessarily doesn't even have to collide, but if it grazes by, it literally can cause up thrusts and down thrusts of the land.
The Colburn Bible also recounts how the Destroyer has passed by the Earth several times. According to the text, the last occurrence devastated Egypt 3,600 years ago.
Its color was bright and fiery in appearance, changing and unstable. And all men agree it was a most fearsome sight.
What really captured my attention about the Colburn Bible is that the ancient Egyptians tell us this object has flown through the system many times before, and 3,600 years ago, it was a horror for them.
But scientists reject this assertion.
Astronomers have done enough celestial mechanics studies to conclude that there's been no flyby at any time in human history.
Could astronomers be wrong? Could the Destroyer be a planet beyond those known in our solar system? A planet in a long elliptical orbit that passes close by Earth once every 3,600 years. Such a body has been the stuff of conjecture for more than 2 decades, after an intriguing discovery in the early 1980s.
There was a lot of concern back in 1983 when a couple of astronomers published the discovery of an infrared source. And at that time there was speculation, not by astronomers but by others, that this was Planet X, the 10th planet.
We believe that this object is anywhere from 4 times the size of the Earth to maybe even perhaps as large as Jupiter.
Those convinced that Planet X exists and is heading our way point to recent astronomical changes they claim are the result of its approach.
The sun is more active in the southern hemisphere than the northern hemisphere, according to NASA probe data. Earth's magnetosphere has been weakening and changing and actually is pointing towards the south. And numerous other things that are happening just tell us that there's some kind of perturber out there.